But Shawn, we are drafting in the big board today. The Superflex drafted is the first one that we've co-drafted together. So for the listeners who may not have played in it before, it is half-point PPR. And it is Superflex. So it's going to be a fun one, but a lot of people will have heard us playing in the FFPC tournaments, and they are tight end premium, and they are not Superflex, obviously. And this is going to be fun, but it's a 30-second clock, so it's going to be pretty rapid fire here.
It is. It's going to be an absolute blast, and it fits in very nicely with a lot of content that we have coming out. We have the Underdog Advanced Rate Tools, which will be out shortly, and just so exciting every time that I give someone a look at those tools internally to play with a little bit and see what they think. They're pretty blown away. So we're excited to debut those and to give a little bit of an early look. Blair Andrews just published a piece looking at some elements from these two tools that we'll have and talking about, well, does zero RB work in Underdog? And one of the interesting things about this is that there were some different dynamics between teams that advanced to the playoffs and teams that did well in the playoffs within the Underdog tournament. So check out Blair's article for that. You know that people do pieces on this kind of thing from time to time, and all of these pieces are good, but when you get a piece from Blair, you know it's going to be very well thought out and have some interesting nuggets that maybe other people aren't looking at. So I highly recommend that. Michael Dumner has put together this RotoViz Friends and Family League that we referenced on the previous show because Peter Overzet is in it. We talked a little bit about his strategy and tactics in that draft, and you'll be able to look at the whole thing. He's going to have the third piece of that out. He's also going to have some info from the tools. You're going to get to hear from the different people who drafted and kind of how they were going about it. I obviously used an approach that is a little bit different for me, but it was a lot of fun to do that. And Colm, we also have this article coming out today from Connor O'Driscoll. Connor, obviously, of FFPC overall best ball tournament champion fame, looking at these rookie quarterbacks who are available and the strengths and weaknesses of their profiles and what it means for drafters. And so one of the things that we're going to do, one of the reasons why we didn't do this draft sort of live with the YouTube audience, beyond the fact that just with the 30-second clock, obviously it's going to be fast and furious, frantic right from the get-go, just as it is. We didn't necessarily want to give away to anybody else out there in the draft that we're looking to select a quarterback early and then take the rookie quarterbacks late and be able to hopefully build a really strong core at the other positions by punting that position. So one of the things that we'll get to see in this draft is whether or not we are successful with that, because waiting for the last players within a tier is the smartest way to draft. It's a huge component of any successful year-long draft strategy. And yet, if you wait and miss, then suddenly your team just doesn't have players, right? And so we'll see how that goes if we have the guts to play chicken long enough to make it make sense. Because if you take the guys too early, then it just counterbalances anything you were going to accomplish with it anyway. But we're going to try and wait on that, and then we'll see how the draft plays out here and if we're able to build a strong enough lineup. Obviously, people know that RotoViz is about zero RB. I don't think people are surprised that Blair's first article looking at the Underdog tools was focused on zero RB. But at the same time, we do like to make some other picks, and we do like some running backs. We'd like a chance to be able to pick some of those players. We had a chance to do that last year with the listener leagues. We're going to have a chance to do it today because in this format with the half PPR and with the Superflex, you actually lose one of the wide receiver positions, right? So it's one QB, two running back, two wide receiver, one tight end, one flex, and one super flex. And so from that perspective, this draft is just simply not going to be very wide receiver heavy. So we'll try and get a star, and then we'll try and fill out behind that player. Look, I have a lot of enthusiasm for this just because these Underdog drafts are a lot of fun. I'm excited to do the first one that we've done of these together. I'm excited to do it for the show. But I'm also excited because whether or not waiting on the rookie QBs actually works in the end, it's going to be fun to put together a team that's loaded at the other positions because we tried it.
Yeah, what the listeners will know when they get through the 20 rounds of listening to this draft is this team completely sunk? We will know that after 20 rounds. If, as Shawn mentioned, those rookies disappear before we get a chance to pick them at the quarterback position. There is that, you mentioned playing chicken. There's always that kind of razor's edge when you're waiting on those players. Do you miss out completely on that tier? And it's different in this situation because you're really waiting on that last tier of quarterback. So it's not like, oh, that tier went, oh, there's other guys there. That means there's nobody left. So we'll see how that plays out. But Shawn has given away a little bit of her strategy there. I think it's going to be pretty fun. He mentioned Fast and Furious. I think it is going to be Fast and Furious. We're picking from the 4th spot. The draft board has just kicked off. So over at Underdog, fills up and you get to find out that selection, and it kicks off pretty quick. So we will be on the clock here in no time at all. Shawn, as we kick things off, some of the targets we're probably looking at is, as you mentioned, getting a star quarterback in those first round. This is almost like I know we'd love to try modified zero RB. This is like a modified Superflex of some sort, where we're going to get that star and then wait as long as we can. So we are hoping to get one of those. Is there any of the quarterbacks of interest here, like strong interest, that you think maybe undervalued at this point? It's hard to say somebody's undervalued at the 4th spot, but when we look at some of these quarterbacks this year, I just think that Lamar Jackson seems to be, I think he should be in those top 2 probably in every draft based on the rushing upside that he gives you. We see him sliding down. It's usually Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and then Lamar Jackson's probably in that mix there. But is there any of those guys you're hoping to get here at the 4th spot, or is there another option for you, Jonathan Taylor or maybe a CMC?
Well, I think it would be fun to draft a Jonathan Taylor in this draft, but it makes it even trickier if we're going to wait on those rookie QBs. To have the 4th pick and to get a shot at one of these anchor quarterbacks, it really allows you to build the entire rest of the draft off that. So that's probably the direction that we'll go. I do think that Jackson is the most undervalued QB here, and several of our guests have mentioned that when they've come on the show in the past. We've had a cool article on the site from Angad talking about that in his debut at RotoViz, while Lamar Jackson really is right there with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes to be the number 1 QB. Now, one of the things that happened here to start, Colm, is that Patrick Mahomes is actually also available to us with the 4th pick. Which direction do you want to go?
Yeah, I really like the prospect here of Lamar Jackson heading into the season. Obviously, we love Patrick Mahomes. He does lose Tyreek Hill, which is going to be a little bit tricky. And still, I think he's going to have a great season. But I just love the rushing upside of Lamar Jackson. I think he can be the league winner this year. So I think we go with Jackson.
So we select Jackson. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes and the other star QBs go off the board very quickly afterwards. Christian McCaffrey and the running backs. The wide receivers are going off. We lose Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp. Colm, what are you looking at as we wrap back into the 2nd round? It'll be on us before we know it. We'll have a chance at some of the lower end running backs. We'll have a chance at this kind of tier break at wide receiver, or potentially we could take Travis Kelsey, and that would sort of free us up to not have to deal with that position again early in the draft, especially during that range where maybe we're going to take those rookie QBs. I kind of like this because you lose one of the wide receiver spots. The tight end position is going to be a little bit more valuable by comparison. Travis Kelsey, the guy who really is just separated from the rest of the position by a wide margin here. Is it Kelsey for you? Do you have someone else you're looking at?
I think Kelsey's interesting. The one player I would be very interested if he does last to us here would be Stefan Diggs. I think that he's probably the wide receiver in that tier that really stands out for me. I think, after that, you're into the T. Higgins kind of Waddle tier. I think that is just slightly below, when you're looking at Diggs. I think he's right up there in the top end. We had John Daigle on a couple of weeks ago, and he actually made the case for him to be the first wide receiver off the board. So I do see, though, with what we're hoping to do here, we have got our quarterback. I think getting Kelsey really frees up the options then as we go through that mid-range of the draft, and we can kind of hold off on tight end quite a bit. So I'm really interested in Diggs here, but I think Kelsey's probably the right call if you want to go that way.
Yes, let's select Kelsey because I think a couple of these wide receivers will probably get back to us early in round 3, perhaps Diggs, perhaps Deebo Samuel. And as you mentioned, Once we get a little bit beyond that, we have another tier break. I mentioned Stefan Diggs in an article that I wrote up talking about where I'm looking at Diggs for this season. I mentioned John's appearance and kind of how that fits in. My overall takeaway was that Diggs probably doesn't have the upside to be, a top 6 pick, maybe even a first round pick. And he obviously was the focal point of a draft that Ben and I did recently for Stealing Bananas. But when you're looking at wrapping around into the second round in a normal draft or the third round in a super flex draft, and again, there are some quarterbacks who would be interesting here, but we're going to try and wait for the rookie QBs. When you're wrapping around into this area, round 3 of super flex, Diggs, I think, a very strong fit, and especially if you already have some of these other positions addressed, to be able to add Diggs to the lineup at that point, a very strong pick. And Colm, the good news is he does come back around.
Yeah, I was hoping he would, and I wasn't very confident he would. So it's nice when that happens, and we've started off really strong there, and I'm very excited with where we're going with the long-term plan and how the rest of the draft is going to play out. We started off with Lamar Jackson, Travis Kelsey, and Stefan Diggs, and I think that's a pretty nice start to have. I was really stuck between going for Diggs or Kelsey in the second round, so nice to get both of those guys. Obviously, we are playing in super flex, so bypassing some quarterback options there. But when we are looking ahead at this particular point, is there any people that are any targets that you might have? Obviously, we have no running backs at this point. It is half-point PPR, so we may have to start to look towards some running back options here in the fourth round when the picks do get back to us.
Yeah, I think that running back is a good position to attack now that we have stars for the other 3 positions. We know the running back and tight end are going to be a little bit more of the overall pie in this one than in a regular draft. And so we want to make sure we have those guys locked down. DeAndre Swift, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, all interesting players who have lasted to this point. We are kind of trying to go for those late round rookie QBs for our second and third quarterbacks in the Superflex draft here. So we'll see if that works out for us. Now, DeAndre Swift just goes off the board. And so we're looking at T. Higgins, Keenan Allen, Jalen Waddle as the top wide receivers. Chubb and Barkley still the top running backs. Alvin Kamara there as well. He potentially has some off-field things that could come up this offseason. Colm, where are you at this point? We are on the clock.
Yeah, we have talked a little bit about Saquon. We've kind of talked about it enough that it maybe feels like we should get some of those shares. If we were looking towards wide receiver, T. Higgins is the one at the top of my list here, just slightly ahead of Waddle after the Hill move. But I would be between Barkley and Higgins here.
Okay, so we go Barkley, and we'll be back around very shortly due to the 30-second clock here. Chubb's still on the board.
The other player that you don't have in the queue, and I can see you've just added him in now, that is of interest is Aaron Jones. I think the Packers, as things are projected at this point, are going to be quite interesting in terms of what they do at wide receiver. Obviously, they're saying Sami Watkins, but I do think we're going to see both running backs have a lot of touches this year in general, but I think both as pass catchers and rushing the ball. So I think Aaron Jones is interesting. So for me here, it's between him and T. Higgins again at this point. Have you a strong preference? The other player that's in there, obviously, if we're targeting some of these rookies, is Breece Hall as well.
Yeah, I think that Breece is going to really rise as soon as this draft happens. But you mentioned Aaron Jones. We had Michael Leone on the show recently. He gave an impassioned pitch for Jones, explaining quite how that would work out, the touchdowns, the receiving ability. Obviously, the receptions maybe not quite as valuable in this format, but the Packers are going to score a lot of points. They're going to score even if they don't have elite wide receivers. That could mean Jones is even more involved. This is a good price, I think, for Jones at this point here. It'd be harder to add the type of value that he'll bring probably than the type of value that T. Higgins will bring. Let's go with Jones here. We get a Packer for you and see how this next sort of longer stretch pans out.
Yeah, and I think that's the right pick to make. I think I'd be shocked if the Packers draft a running back that's going to challenge either Jones or AJ Dillon. So, and obviously the Packers need those wide receivers. And the last couple of drafts, they have kind of gone to the opposite of what people maybe would have expected. But I'd be shocked if that happens this year. But yeah, Breece Hall, you touched on it there. I think he is going to rise up these draft boards pretty sharp once the draft comes in. There is a little bit less of a value it feels this year. People are catching on to the potential, increases in rookies once we get to the draft and how that can help those teams. So I think in these early season tournaments, people are pretty sharp this year to that, but I still think that Hall could go up, 2 to 2.5 rounds when it comes to a couple of weeks' time, depending on that landing spot. But Jones, I think a good fit there. We did pass over Higgins twice. Obviously, it's just a little bit more of a lean towards some of those running backs in this format with the 0.5 PPR. So we'll see who makes it back to us. There is some interesting wide receiver candidates that may make it back to us. So hoping that will happen. Breece Hall did just go off the board at the 56th pick. That was the 8th pick of the 5th round. And T. Higgins did go 1 pick before that, with Jalen Waddle going 1 pick after Breece Hall. So some of the guys there that we did like have shifted off the board pretty quick, and that can happen, but I'm pretty happy with the guys we took. And I do think, Shawn, there's going to be some interesting options coming back to us at the wide receiver position as well. But there's a number of the guys that are in this range where I think if they had a different quarterback, they would be valued much, much higher. The likes of DK Metcalf at the moment, Terry McLaurin's in that mix. There's a lot of guys in there who just, the quarterback situation is quite scary. We did talk about that on a show recently. But as we do, move through to the back end of the 5th round here and the 6th round kicks off, is there any players that maybe that you're hoping that will slide through to us?
Well, it'll be interesting if Daniel Jones made it back around, even though that's not the position we're looking at. James Conner, obviously a touchdown scoring machine in the Arizona offense. As long as Breece Hall does not land on him in the draft, then he's a crazy value at this point. We have some players who could break out, like a Jerry Jeudy with Russell Wilson. We have Deontay Johnson there, who I think will jump after we get a little bit of a feel for who the QB will be. I do think that the value here at running back is still very sturdy, and it makes sense to build up a little bit more there and try and benefit from the foundation pieces we have at some of these other positions and the risk that we're going to take at quarterback. So we'll see if these guys last. So we have David Montgomery, Travis Etienne, J.K. Dobbins, the other running backs there, as James Conner goes off the board in a stretch of 3 picks. The 5'12", Cam Akers, the 6'01", James Conner, the 6'2", is Josh Jacobs. And I think that makes sense. We have Keenan Allen going off at the 6'03". We're into the area of the draft now where quarterbacks have stopped going. People are filling out the rest of their positions. There's not a lot of tight end value at this portion of the board either, which is kind of interesting. So very glad to have gotten Travis Kelsey at the beginning of the draft. Dalton Schultz, the next tight end up here. Dalton Schultz and Dallas Goedert, obviously guys you can pick and do go in this range when you're thinking of not Superflex, but with the Superflex element, obviously pushing those guys down multiple rounds.
So we are 2 picks away. Some of the options that we may be looking at are, you mentioned Deontay Johnson, I think very interesting. Then 2 running backs coming back from injury, and Travis Etienne and J.K. Dobbins. But I do think that if it lasts out and if it works out for us here as we wait for those 2 picks, I think Deontay Johnson is probably the guy to go for here as he goes off the board, just as I say that. So we're 1 pick away. We have 3 running backs really in the queue that are our targets here as we're on the clock. Shawn, where are you looking? I know you have David Montgomery in there. He's never been one of my favorite guys, but looks to be set to probably have the lion's share of the work there. But Etienne or Dobbins is probably where I would probably go for the upside play. But where are you going here?
Yeah, well, let's take Etienne first, and that one will be a little bit fun. And then we can take Montgomery coming back around as the consolation pick if he does make it to that point. I do think he's a very good pick in half PPR. I think that even though the Chicago Bears, all the talk around them right now is that it's a complete teardown, the team is going to be absolutely awful. I think that Justin Fields is going to be able to keep the offense a little bit more afloat than maybe it seems like. And so I guess I have some enthusiasm there at the right price. And at this point, we're definitely seeing these guys really fall. Montgomery, somebody, it hurts him a little bit that he could lose some receptions with the scrambling quarterback, but Fields maybe doesn't fall quite as much into that range. Plus, there's so many touches with him. Now, he does go at the 701, 3 picks before where we're sitting. And so we have Dobbins as the only non-QB on the board here. DJ Moore is an interesting pick, however, and the other thing I was going to mention is that Ezekiel Elliott also goes off in the interim there. So the 6'12", the 701, Elliott and Montgomery, the 2 backs who have had great EP numbers, but are no longer popular due to Elliott, all of the injuries, obviously, and how inefficient he was last year. Tony Pollard just really nipping at his heels. Montgomery, more the offensive situation. And people continue to sour on him as he actually consolidates and proves that he's a quality NFL running back. Colm, at this point, the guy who does come back is J.K. Dobbins. We only have 8 seconds.
DJ Moore is the pick. We're not going to get him. Draft Dobbins. We ran out of time there. I was going to make the pitch for DJ Moore. I think you were kind of mentioning that people souring on him a little bit. I think what he has been able to do throughout his career so far with the quarterbacks he has played with shows how talented of a wide receiver that he is. I think that, this year it's likely again that the quarterback situation isn't going to be great, but we've talked about in this draft potentially getting some of those rookie quarterbacks later in the draft. And I think what we need to look at there is getting those rookies. There's a chance that one of them lands with Carolina. There's a chance that is, although, they may not be amazing as rookies, it could be a big upgrade on what he's had over the last kind of season to season and a half in Carolina. So I think that he can still be very, very interesting there. So somebody who I'll be targeting again in drafts, and if we can get a little bit of a discount on him in future drafts, I'll be pushing to take him. We just did run out of time. How would you have felt in hindsight if we had taken him over ETN, who we did also mention as a possible option in the round prior? So happy with that pick, but DJ Moore I think would be interesting there.
No, I wanted J.K. Dobbins, so I'm very happy with how that turned out. I just the quarterback situation there, I think, destroys the situation with DJ Moore, and especially with him not coming through in week 17 last year, it just doesn't leave a good feeling. There are a lot of wide receivers kind of after this point. So one of the things that's tricky is that round 3, 4, 5 range that we have traditionally loved for the receivers, that range is weak this season. But especially right now, where we still have these rookie wide receivers a little bit cheaper, I think after that we get back into this range that I like. So basically we're saying that 3, 4, 5 is not a great area for any position, and yet I do think there are some fun running backs in there. We took a risk with 2 guys coming back from injury. Again, we're building this team with a ton of upside. It's obviously going to have a ton of downside too, something you can do in a league that costs $10 but has a pretty good grand prize. Colm, I love the way that this has played out so far. Now, we're 5 picks away again as the draft wraps around quickly. Dalton Schultz, I think, very interesting at this point because we do want to dominate the tight end position. And then there are a lot of receivers that we can start to look at. We have Marquise Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Darnell Mooney, Gabriel Davis, who still feels very undervalued in best ball, especially Kadarius Toney, Garrett Wilson. We get into the rookies here, Treylon Burks, Drake London. You got a couple more running backs in Rashad Penny and Devin Singletary. Now, we are up to the 4 running backs, but I think there is some value to getting those guys early and then kind of forgetting about it. The quarterbacks have stopped going, although Malik Willis was selected. It would be a possibility to grab one of these rookie QBs. The top guys listed by the theoretical Superflex ADP here in Underdog: Davis Mills, Jared Goff, Marcus Mariota. I don't think we want any of them. What are you seeing here when you look at the board and our queue?
Yeah, I think I'd be going wide receiver here with Amon-Ra St. Brown or probably Kadarius Toney, one of those 2 guys. They seem to be listener favorites at the moment as well, so I think people would enjoy hearing us pick them. But I think with what Amon-Ra St. Brown done as a rookie, heading into his 2nd season now, and I know we're still concerned about the quarterback play of Jared Goff, but I think like we talk about players stepping up into that 2nd year, I think he's very interesting and did have really positive production as a rookie down the stretch there, Shawn. So we did take St. Brown. We are going to wrap around to get our next pick and 5 picks. This draft is playing out quite well for us, and we talk about tiers, and I know we talk sometimes about wide receiver not being as deep as people expect, and I know we're in Superflex here, and it is half-point PPR, but I do think there is a little bit of a drop-off when we get through some of these guys. But what we don't want to do is get completely priced out or completely lose out on the quarterback strategy we had. So what's your thoughts on going for, say, Kadarius Toney or a Garrett Wilson coming up here next versus getting one of those rookie quarterbacks?
I'd like to watch them still fall through this range and see who comes back, because we're going to try and get a lot of them in that doesn't have as big of an impact if you then pick them a little bit earlier than maybe you could have gotten them. Jared Goff is gone though. And so once Jared Goff is gone, I think all bets are off in terms of where he's going to go, because we know that he's not going to have a big impact on the 2022 season, or at least we wouldn't guess. I think that I like the rookie wide receivers here. Wilson, Burks, London, all available. Colm, which is your preference of these guys?
I've been kind of divvying it up as we go through it. So I'll go with Wilson in this particular one. I know obviously we can go as well off talent, go off the numbers and the projections, but I do think after we're doing a process like this where we're going to be heading into the draft and seeing some of these ADP shift, I think landing spot is a very key part of that. So I think depending on how the draft order shakes out, some of the guys that go earlier in the draft may not fall in the best landing spots. We'll see how that plays out. But Shawn, we are running through this draft. It is rapid fire. You mentioned that it was going to be fast and a lot of action at the start of episode 1 when we went through the opening rounds of that draft. We are picking from the 4th spot, and we have quite an interesting team going so far. We have Lamar Jackson, Travis Kelsey, Stefan Diggs. We've loaded up on running backs. We do have Saquon Barkley, Aaron Jones, Travis Etienne, and J.K. Dobbins. So this team is going to be very, very interesting to see how we finish out this draft. We mentioned at the start of the last show that we are targeting those rookie quarterbacks, trying to see what we can do. How many rookies are we going to finish up this draft with? I'm excited to see how it plays out. Obviously, the draft happening in a couple of weeks. We're hoping to see some of those values jump a round or 2 rounds after that draft, and that will help us here with this team. But Shawn, so far, I mentioned the players we have. I think it's interesting, but it's a 30-second clock. It is rapid fire. It's rapid action. So looking forward to wrapping the rest of this draft out and seeing how we progress here.
We are. We're still into that question of whether or not we can get our rookie quarterbacks, or whether we wait too long and end up basically with no quarterbacks in a Superflex draft, in which case we will obviously not win. I'm excited about the direction that this is going, with getting that strong foundation at running back after getting Kelsey and Diggs to start. I think we're in the perfect situation. We now have this opportunity to build the wide receivers through this next group of picks. We have some young wide receivers we like. Obviously, we tend to hammer the young wide receivers as we move through drafts. And, as Blair Andrews always says, upside is basically the number of rookies that you have on your team. Now, the flip side of that, or the caveat, the thing that you have to make sure that you do is get good prices on these rookies. So we don't want to be reaching above ADP. We want to take the guys who fall to us. And that allows us to have value relative to the field as people are drafted currently, but also creates a situation to where if we hit on some of the players, and we wouldn't necessarily expect to hit on all of them, but we're structuring the draft in such a way that if we hit on some of the key guys and they make a big jump later, then we have more value on this team than that we're drafting against. But again, price discipline is going to be important even as we try to select some fun players.
So, Shawn, we have our roster stacked up so far. We do have 1 quarterback so far, so we have to look with the Superflex element in mind. Who do we pair with Lamar Jackson? We're pretty looking good at running back with the 4 running backs we have taken. And then we have stocked up a couple of wide receivers over the last couple of rounds with Amon-Ra, St. Brown, and Garrett Wilson joining in with Stefan Diggs, who we took in round 3, and then Travis Kelsey, who is our 2nd round pick. So as we move into round 10, some of the players coming off the board are Christian Kirk, Dawson Knox, Chase Claypool. Brandon Ayuk goes off the board at the 10-5. Then 10-6 is Tyler Lockett. But Shawn, we are 2 picks away. Where are we looking here?
Well, Kareem Hunt just went, and he was someone that I thought would have been interesting. I think that Burks now is the guy. He's the remaining player of those rookie wide receivers. We can attack a different position as we wrap back around. And I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who is still lasting to this point and would make an interesting kind of final piece of the puzzle with the running backs that we already have.
Yeah, I think it's nice to get those rookies in there, trying to build on that to see how things play out. You mentioned Edwards-Helaire. Hasn't really been our guy very often, but obviously as a Chiefs fan, we have talked about him quite a bit. And of course, everyone knows Shawn at this point. They drafted him over Jonathan Taylor. But I don't know how long it will be until that eventually wears off. The other player, though, Shawn, I'm kind of interested in here, but I think there's a little bit of ADP to go, and that is Albert Okwuegbunam, who is there as well. If we wanted to pair somebody up with Travis Kelsey, I think getting him at this point could be quite nice. There's a couple of other tight ends there in Gesicki and Fairmouth who I think are very interesting as well. But Albert O, I think, is somebody extremely interesting at this point. But Edward Zelaire is there. I think he's somebody at this point, if we hadn't racked up the running back options we have so far, I think I would be leaning into that. But I think I would probably be picking. We've talked about tight ends a couple of times and how it does kind of taper off after this range of tight end. So again, willing to lean into whatever direction you want to go. But I do think he is somebody, especially with Russell Wilson, who's in a good spot here.
Yeah, it's tricky because I do think the tight ends will last, and we have a shot to get some fun ones late, which might make sense with Travis Kelsey sort of already in there. The flip side of that, though, we talk about drafting front to back and back to front, is that at some point we are going to have to take these quarterbacks, probably the next wraparound. And so we might have to wait again. I think that tight end in this particular format is deep enough that it probably makes sense to wait on that position and with Kelsey in mind, and try and make sure that we get the running backs here, especially with the situation that we have where we've taken a lot of risk. And Edward Zelaire, another back who you can't necessarily count on with what he has done over the past several seasons, but the upside is gigantic. They've talked about passing to him more in 2022 to help balance out the loss of Tyreek Hill. It'll be interesting to see if that does pan out in that fashion. Now, one of the things that has been interesting both in this draft and the FFPC slow draft that I'm doing with Zach is that there's virtually no gap at this point between Edward Zelaire and Ronald Jones. And so we are not necessarily surprised by that. We believe that probably makes sense. Ronald Jones, especially in this format here, has the chance to be the goal line back, even though he's not a big back either. He has the chance to be the guy who really does run between the tackles, break those long runs. So we like both of those guys. I think it makes sense to get some exposure to both of them. I don't think they're going to consistently go that close together. And so that's one of the reasons why getting some Edward Zelaire right there makes some sense. Now, I mentioned the tight ends. We've had a huge tight end run since that pick. Colm, you were all over that. Albert O goes off a few picks later than Mike Gesicki. Chris Olave then back with Rob Gronkowski. So we're now here with Pat Freiermuth as the top guy, but there are other good options. We have Hunter Henry, who had a solid season in Mac Jones' debut. We have Robert Tonyan, who's been re-signed to go with Aaron Rodgers there. Cole Kmet, a potential breakout, and somebody's going to
Shawn,
from.
You're obviously not on the Twitter streets, but I don't know if you've seen the pictures. Cole Kmet looks pretty jacked this year. People are excited on the Twitter streets.
Well, yeah, and I mean it's him and Justin Fields for any chance at moving the ball this year for the Chicago Bears. So I'm very excited about that. It doesn't seem like it's really moving his ADP a ton. So he can lift weights and shred all he wants. His ADP is not going to move as long as the Chicago Bears are in their current state.
Yeah, it feels like that's the way it's going to be. But sometimes you can, it's interesting what will change people's minds when it comes to drafting some of these players. But yeah, I didn't think it would go quite as much as that. But sometimes when you're in that spot where you're not picking for those kind of 24 picks after your pick, a lot can change. So Fairmouth goes off the board. It was interesting too. You did mention Ronald Jones, and of course we also had the situation there with us drafting CEH, and they went within 2 picks. So Ronald Jones going 2 picks after. So I don't think they'll probably be that close, but yeah, it'll be interesting. I think it's a case a bit like I mentioned with the wide receivers earlier, getting a little bit of diversity between those guys. The likelihood is one of them could have that monster season that wins you a lot of money this year. So I think getting some diversification between them is the way to go. 2 picks away, Shawn. We still have an option here for 3 of the quarterbacks. Sorry, 4 of the rookie quarterbacks. And then we do have some of these tight ends. The wide receiver options available are the likes of Robert Woods, who's coming back off injury, Kenny Golladay, who had a really down season. Then we have Jacoby Myers and Tim Patrick Will Fuller still there, but there's some of the interesting rookies coming up in that range too, like Sky Moore. But where's some of the preference here as we land on the clock?
Well, I like Galladay or starting out the QBs with Matt Corral. It seems like he may be the first of the guys that we're looking at. Desmond Ridder, obviously an interesting choice as well to kind of fluctuate based on the different boards. Let's go ahead and take Galladay. That will give us the wide receiver depth to not have to worry there. It allows us to punt that wide receiver decision or the quarterback decision a little bit more. We have a ton of tight ends in our queue. We don't have to worry about them too much right now. Colm, who are you looking at here among these QBs? Pickett, Corral, Ridder, Howell. We like them all. Pickett, obviously the safest he's going to go in the first 20 picks, almost for sure. The other three guys, higher upside. How do you want to play in this draft?
Yeah, I think the thing I'm going to laugh at here, Shawn, is you said about the tight ends in the queue, and we don't have to really worry about that. But Robert Tonyan, Cole Kmet, and Herb Smith have gone off the board 3 picks in a row. So that queue got a little bit shorter there. But I do think it's a case of the guys that are in that queue, I think, are going to go later as Noah Fant goes off the board. We're on the clock. I think leaning here towards quarterback, I do think that Matt Corral is probably the one that I'm going to target the most out of this group at this point of the season. So I would be happy to go with Corral at this point. After that, then it will be Pickett, Howell, and then Ridder. But your call. I know you're interested as well in those tight ends after it eased up. But when we looked through the tight ends, Shawn, that were available at that point, it was Noah Fant actually gone off the board prior to our pick. So we were down to Hunter Henry and Everett in the queue. That's 2 quite substantial runs on tight ends that we have seen. The big difference to this versus the likes of the FFPC drafts that we do is the fact that it's not tight end premium, and also the option, the likelihood of playing the tight end and the flex is not the same. So when we're moving forward, we have spent that high draft capital in the second round on Travis Kelsey. So this team's really going to ride with that. So we'll see how it plays out. But I do think part of the strategy of waiting this late to go with those rookie quarterbacks, I think it's obviously key to get some of them. We're looking at the players in Superflex that we're trying to target. Some of these tight ends are not going to have the upside off the quarterbacks we're targeting in this strategy. So how are you feeling though, Shawn, as those tight ends have dried up reasonably quite a bit at this point?
They have. I really like Gerald Everett for this season. I think he has a chance to absolutely explode with Justin Herbert. Now, we have to keep in mind that there were going to be similar things said about his original situation with the Los Angeles Rams and that very good offense there. Obviously, he didn't have Matthew Stafford, so a little bit of apples and oranges, but then he goes and he plays with Russell Wilson, has a few solid games, definitely piques everybody's interest again, but now goes and has this chance with the Chargers. The upside there is just through the roof. And so I would love to get him. We do have Pickett off the board, and the QBs are getting very, very limited. And so that probably the direction that we want to go. Again, here, Sam Darnold, the other player who is still available. So we've left it to the end. We'll see if at least one of our 2 guys makes it to this next spot. Colm, it's going to be a tough wait through the next 7 picks.
Yeah, and interesting for you, there's 2 of our guys here, and Ridder and Howell, and then the other player that's in the mix is Everett. So I think we want to really get 2 of those guys through these next 2 of those 3 through these next couple of picks here as they come up. We are 2 picks away, so there is a chance that we're going to have an option for that. The other players in the queue are George Pickens, and the other one was Sky Moore, who just went off the board. So we're 1 pick away. We have our 2 quarterbacks, we have our tight end. We're definitely going to get one of those guys. It feels here, Shawn, like we probably should go and get the quarterback at this point. But what's the option of taking Everett, who you mentioned that you do like for this season, over one of the QBs and hoping that one of them then roll back to us in the next round?
Well, Ridder does make it, and I don't think that we can risk him going through. Howell, I think, is much more likely to drop a decent amount. So let's go ahead and take Ridder. Now we can see if Everett comes back through. I'd be willing to take Howell as well and just completely punt at the tight end position, see how it does develop. If we look at tight ends exclusively, there is a big drop off after Everett is gone. We have Evan Ingram, we have Hayden Hurst. After that, it gets pretty bleak pretty quickly. Someone like Brevin Jordan would be interesting. Trey McBride, the rookie.
That was one I was going to mention, yeah.
Yeah, especially after he It's such a good overall profile, likely be drafted early and then has the fantastic pro day. We know that the rookie tight ends are a little bit tricky to count on in fantasy, but last season having a lot of Freiermuth late in best ball was very, very effective. I think that there's a potential for that to also play out here. We lose Pickens. He's probably the one that if we were going to lose one of our guys, we would be more okay with. Howell and Everett still there, 3 picks before we get another shot.
Yeah, and the other tight end, sorry, when you were talking about Trey McBride, the one that I was referencing was Brevin Jordan, who I think could be interesting. And the Texans at this point have really nobody there, but I think he showed enough in his rookie season that I think there's a nice bit of potential there from him. We are 2 picks away. We're holding our breath as Robinson of the Jacksonville Jaguars goes off the board. So 2 more picks to go. I was getting my hopes up there. I thought there was 1 pick to go. Interesting that the team that's picking now has 2 quarterbacks so far. They may dip their toes into that rookie quarterback pool here and snipe us, Shawn, as we get ready. So we'll see as they have 8 seconds left. They go with Davis of the New York Jets, wide receiver, Corey Davis, and we'll see now as things go. The person drafting now 3 quarterbacks for them at this point, so we're hoping that they might let this one slide through. Sam Howell, Shawn, I think even if Everett is there, probably has to be the main pick there, or are we sliding into tight end if it does last true?
We'll make this pick of Howell, and then we'll see if McBride comes back around. If he doesn't, I think we'll be a little bit disappointed. But, I mean, we're not going to win if Travis Kelsey doesn't have a good season. And so there's less of a need, I think, to hit that other tight end position, whereas our entire strategy revolved around hitting these rookie QBs and having the group of 3 to see who comes out of that. And especially as we kind of go down the stretch of the season, if those 3 guys are playing with Lamar Jackson, then you have huge upside there. We're very strong at running back, good at wide receiver, have the top tight end. That entire build, I think, is fantastic and fun in terms of tournaments. Both of those things, we're going to put some emphasis on. We want to have a good time with this and then give ourselves the upside to win the whole thing. So, Colm, I really like the way this has gone. We are now finishing up round 15. We will have 5 selections left. We need to use some of these guys to strengthen out that tight end spot, but also filling out at the rest of the positions. Kenny Gainwell, an interesting running back. Jarvis Landry, not having signed, is still sitting out there. James Washington, an interesting player, at least until the Cowboys fill up the rest of their passing offense. Robbie Anderson sticking around if you do want a Panthers wide receiver late. Julio Jones, not currently on a team, still out there. Who do you see here? Laviska Shenault. We can't trade.
Look who's there, Shawn. Look who's there. It's KJ Hamler. So we have to look, and Sammy Watkins is still sliding about there, so we may dot him into the queue as well. But when we look through it, I think it's going to be an interesting last 5 rounds to wrap things up. The one thing I will say is this is one of the first underdog drafts that we have done. Well, there's the first one we've done together. I've done a couple of them, but this is a lot of fun. It's 30-second clock. It's really rapid fire. I often joke after we do these shows that getting a pick kind of between spot 4 and 9 is the sweet spot for when you're trying to draft and record a podcast at the same time. So getting the 4th spot here was a lot of fun, but really quick and flying through it, really enjoying it. Shawn, show us the draft board as I give the listeners a quick rundown so we can decide as to what way we need to fix up here for our roster as we finish things up. So we have Lamar Jackson at this point. We have Matt Corral, Desmond Ridder, Sam Howell. So we have the 3 of those kind of top 5 rookie quarterbacks. We have Saquon Barkley, Aaron Jones. We have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Travis Etienne, J.K. Dobbins, and then we have Stefan Diggs paired up with some of the rookie options then in the wide receiver position with Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks. We have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Kenny Golladay, and then we have Travis Kelsey at tight end. So let's see how it plays out. Trey McBride is still there. We are on the clock. Is McBride the way we go here? Do we really dive into the all-rookie all-star team?
That's an interesting way. I think that Jarvis Landry still stands out as such a good value, but we do have some other wide receivers we want to pick. So let's go ahead and not risk it. We'll take Trey McBride. We'll probably we'll regret that. But again, I mean, we're fading the players who didn't come through for us in week 17. So Jarvis Landry has that DJ Moore black mark against him.
I was wondering if all had been forgiven to Jarvis after he cost us that top spot.
And he does go one pick after ours, so he does not make it back through this 6-pick stretch that we would have needed to make. So now, Colm, we're looking at Laviska Shenault, KJ Hamler, Trey Sermon, an interesting pick that Pete mentioned when he was on the show the other day. Still have Hayden Hurst there with Joe Burrow. Still have Brevin Jordan if we wanted to add another tight end. There are a few of these late rookie running backs in Tyler Algier and Pierre Strong that I really like at this point. Which direction do you want to go here?
Yeah, we're on the clock, obviously 20 seconds to go. The thing with Shenault, obviously, I think that last year's situation there was terrible. I think I would still be giving him a little bit of a benefit of the doubt to see what he could do this year, particularly the way we've set up this wide receiver room at the moment. The player that I think is a really interesting spot, and you're just taking a risk that he may not get signed anywhere this year, that's Julio Jones, but you may also see him signed with some of the better landing spots as we get closer to the NFL season. So I do think Julio could be interesting, but I think based on the options there, he is the right pick, and that is Laviska Shenault. The other person, Shawn, that's a little bit interesting, and I know people want to kind of say, he signed with the Packers and it's not going to work out and he hasn't done a lot of good stuff, but I don't think you can really underestimate getting another opportunity with somebody like the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, and based on the wide receiver situation that they are in at the moment. So I think that, like, at this point, when we're looking at some of the names off players, and I do think, like, AJ Green starting to go in this range. I think that he's somebody I'm probably not interested in at all, but I think Watkins could be in there. I know we like Hamler, but Hamler's coming back off a serious injury, so there is a lot of competition for targets there in Denver versus what Watkins might see in Green Bay. So Watkins does go off the board. But just on that point, Shawn, we haven't got to talk about it since that news broke. Is he somebody that's on any part of your radar for 2022 now?
Well, it's funny that the players that you mentioned together there, because they both signed right before my pick in round 20 of our underdog draft that Michael Dubner put together for the site, and we'll have the final write-up for early this week. Colm, AJ Green was a solid player last year, and we'll go back to a situation where targets will be available again. Sami Watkins has been done for a long time. That was a frustrating signing for me by the Green Bay Packers because they had showed such restraint with the rest of their players. Now, I realize that he probably is still not even going to make the team, but it just is a weird way to go when you have guys like Julio Jones, which I think would be an interesting player to pick here. And he does go with the 17-11. But Julio Jones still out there, Jarvis Landry out there, Will Fuller out there. It does feel like you're just trolling your fans when you sign Sami Watkins.
I honestly think that stranger things have happened, but I do think he's going to be a role player in that offense. And like, he probably, I would hope when the season starts that he might be a wide receiver 3. But the other problem is that then the other wide receivers they have at the moment are Randall Cobb, who I hope is not anywhere near wide receiver 1, and then the same with Lazard, who I think should be wide receiver 2 in this offense. So the ideal situation is one of the rookies come in. But you mentioned Julio, and Julio is also, aging. He's not what he once was, but he still has had some impressive plays over the last two seasons or so. So yeah, maybe they are trolling a little bit, Shawn, but so some funny things can work out. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, he does look like he's been done for quite some time. But when you are in the 18th round of drafts, I think sometimes that opportunity has to be taken. We are now coming up to 2 picks away from our next selection. How should we be tailoring the end of this draft now with the kind of ideal roster construction?
Well, one of the things that's a little bit frustrating is a lot of the guys we were looking at did go. So we lose Brevin Jordan a couple of picks back. We lose KJ Hamler a couple of picks before that. Trey Sermon goes off the board. Julio Jones goes off the board. So most of the value disappears between our picks in round 17 and 18. Perhaps not a surprise, but a little bit disappointing. There's some rookie running back names I like here in Algier, Strong, Kyron Williams, even despite his workout numbers. Why don't we go with one of these guys, Colm? And I think I would probably lean towards Strong here.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think we may as well. We have leaned in quite heavily, Shawn, to the rookies. I think we can, pardon the pun here, but we can lean even stronger into it as we do take Strong with that pick. But yeah, I think we're just looking to kind of tailor out some of these, but I think we're looking to seek upside here rather than just seek that floor. There is some other running backs available in that range, like James White, like Dante Foreman. I thought Foreman was very impressive last year when he was filling in for Derrick Henry, but I think it's going to be tricky outside of another McCaffrey injury for him to get a lot of work this year with the Cardinals. But when we're in a tournament like this, Shawn, you mentioned earlier the top end prizes, but if you're aiming for that top 10 finish, top 5 finish, you're really looking for that upside. You're not looking to just finish middle of the pack. So I think going rookie there is a smart pick. We do have 4 quarterbacks, 6 running backs, 6 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, one of them being Travis Kelsey, the other being Trey McBride. I think at this point, Shawn, we're probably sitting out tight end the rest of the way. Is that what you're thinking? And who are we going for here with our 19th round pick?
Well, Algier comes back and is also interesting and would be a potential flex option late in draft. So let's go ahead and select him. That way we have sort of 2 shots at this rookie running back that could really rise. At the tight end position, I do think that having a little bit more protection there might be interesting if Jonnu Smith comes back to us. He's somebody who was not involved at all with the Patriots last season, but they've already made a number of moves and some comments to suggest that they weren't happy with the way Josh McDaniels ran that part of the offense after they signed Smith to all of that money. Now we know he's one of the most athletic tight ends in the NFL. It's really a question of if he ever comes through as a receiver. That's something he struggled with. Now, the expectations in Tennessee with the quality of the passing offense there, were not particularly high, but there was some optimism that he could be unlocked with New England. That didn't happen at all, as he was used almost exclusively as a blocker and as someone for little manufactured touches around the line of scrimmage. In year 2 with the Patriots, we may see a different approach there. And that part of it, I think, is interesting. David Bell and Jalen Tolbert, the rookie wide receivers, who probably will still sneak into the end of day 2. James White, a running back, back with the Patriots as a potential passing down back for them. Again, even in the half PPR, you catch a lot of passes at this juncture of the draft. You score a few touchdowns, and that weekly value can be there for you. Another name or two that I would throw out, Tommy Tremble, someone who, if somehow the Carolina Panthers were to get back around and have a functional offense, I think that he could be one of these breakout tight ends in his second season. Now, a breakout within the context of the scoring still being relatively low. But you look at the overall board here, and Marquez Callaway was the top name. The players to go off in the last 3 picks: Amari Rodgers, Sterling Shepard, Callaway. We're closing in on the end column, so obviously the names are not going to be that exciting, but someone like a Paris Campbell, I think, would be interesting as the Colts try and rebuild their offense. Alec Pierce, another rookie wide receiver, doesn't have the production that we like to see, but extremely athletic. Someone, again, who probably will go on day 2 of the reality draft. What names are you seeing here that you'd have some interest in as we go down the stretch and make our 20th round pick?
It's always fun when we get to the 20th round. And I think for the listeners, they always are looking to see what names that Shawn drops as like potential interesting options at that particular point of the draft. I was very disappointed with Jonnu Smith last season. I thought, you mentioned he wasn't used well. He goes off the board. He kind of saves us from that pick, but it really did not work out, and it was very unimpressive. Tremble is somebody who had a little bit of buzz heading into the league and, has shown flashes, but very, very little. And we've talked about how the quarterback situation there is a concern. Somebody at this point, and I know in terms of like James White is there, Kyron Williams is there. I think Eno Benjamin is somebody at this point who could be interesting based on roster that we have at the moment. We do have 7 running backs. I don't know if you have a preference here to go for an 8th running back because of the half-point PPR or because of the risk we've taken at wide receiver with the rookies. If you want to go for a wide receiver, if we're going wide receiver, I think I would be leaning towards Paris Campbell, but I think Benjamin, because of if the Cardinals don't take, say, a Breece Hall and sink Connor's value, I think then Benjamin could be in a really intriguing spot for this season at that point.
The other option here, too, would be the other rookie tight end out of UCLA. Our great friend Patrick Corain in his recent rookie tight end rankings had him up there with Trey McBride. So if we're concerned about the tight end position, that would be an option. Both of the rookie wide receivers I was interested in did go.
Benjamin went as well.
And so we are on the very dregs here as we make our final selection.
So I think we should either go with Paris Campbell, who is a very unexciting pick, or else we should go with the second rookie tight end to just really go all out, all rookie. So if you want to slide him in, I guess then you're getting 2 darts that if it doesn't work out for Trey McBride in year 1, you still aren't just completely settled with one option in Travis Kelsey. But I do think, Shawn, there's going to be some unique teams in these tournaments. And I think obviously you don't want to be so unique that it really just doesn't work at all. But this here could be a very interesting team to look at come 4 weeks' time after the NFL draft to see where this goes through. So just looking down through it, we have 3 rookie quarterbacks. I think we have 2 rookie wide receivers, 2 rookie running backs, and 2 rookie tight ends. So between everything there, I think we have 7 rookies out of the 20 rounds. So very, very rookie heavy. But if you're going to do that, I think now is the time to try and do that. But that is going to wrap us up for the draft. We will also do a bit of a recap, Shawn, as we go through and talk through maybe some of the things. I know there was some options earlier in it that we may have changed, we may have slotted out, but yeah, a really fun draft to run through and the Big Board Superflex tournament over at Underdog.com. Remember again, if you are signing up to Underdog.com, you can use the code RotoViz to get yourself a $100 sign-up bonus match. So if you deposit $100 or anything up to $100 will be matched, you can use that for your Underdog drafts all off season. If you're like me and Shawn, you want to dive in, you probably use it up pretty quick because these drafts are super fun, as you'll have heard from me and Shawn running through this one today. But we will be back as we do a brief recap of how we thought it went, what we might change, what we liked, what we didn't like as we wrap up this draft. So thanks again for tuning in. And until we're back with another episode, my name is Colm Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Overtime Ireland. My co-host is Shawn Siegele, and you can check out all of his work up on RotoViz.com. And until we're back with the recap, have a good one. Thank you for listening to Overtime on RotoViz Radio. Please rate and review the RotoViz Radio podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. You can contact us via email at rotovizradio@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at RotoViz Radio. And remember, you can always support the pod by subscribing to RotoViz with a discount through the RotoViz Radio homepage, rotoviz.com/podcast.